and it's part of the culture. It's very ingrained in everything you do. So we're kind of teaching people about coffee, you know, because coffee connects so many of us from so many different backgrounds, and it was really an organic process to become a social justice coffee shop, and I think that's what's really helped and like solidified our presence here. It started with, there was a young woman in the community who was, unfortunately she was killed by police. So it started with Jesse Hernandez and people not having a place to organize, a place to meet. And then there were a series of murders, let's be honest, of young people, especially young black men. And people didn't know where to go. And so we became that place where people could come and just grieve. And so I think, you know, the word just kept getting out, like, we can go there, we'll be accepted there. And so I think we turned into like a landing place for folks when crazy stuff was happening in the community. It was a place that people could come and just compose themselves, if nothing else.
Our streets! Our streets! Our streets!
Something feels different this time around because for a lot of black folks, it's Groundhog's Day. Someone else was killed, we'll go out and march, we'll go out and protest, and then a week later or a month later, the same thing happens. I was telling my husband the other day, we used to live in Montclair, and I was driving down Quebec and First Avenue, and there was a group of people with protest signs, and it was Black Lives Matter and you know, all the George Floyd and all these things, and they were all white and they were multi-generational, and they were in their neighborhood basically talking to other white people, and I'm like, that's powerful. That's so powerful, and that's what it takes. And I think some people will say too, well, most of your customers are not black. I mean, I would say 75% of our customers are white. And my response to that is, our common thread is a need for justice. So everyone who comes here supports that. If Black Lives Matter, then so does black business. And so some people are very intentional about coming to spend their dollars at a black business in a neighborhood that used to be an entirely black community. So I just feel really blessed to be in this community at this time and have the support that we have. If there's anything I can add, I would just say, please find your place in what's happening right now. We're in the middle of a very historic moment, and we all have a role.
Welcome to the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee meeting of Denver City Council. Full coverage of this session of the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee begins now.
Zach, can we start without a quorum? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ludi this morning. I'll go around. I'm Councilwoman Sandoval representing Northwest Denver, and we can go around the room and start with introductions, and I'll start with on my right.
I think that's...
Okay, there we go. Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Joel Clark, District 7.
Jamie Torres, District 3.
And I see Councilman Cashman walking in. Thank you, Councilman Cashman, for joining us. So I think we have a quorum now, correct?
Yes, and we also have Councilwoman Sita Baca online.
Okay. And would you like to do introduction, Candy? Councilman
District 9. Candy said that.
Okay. All right. This morning we have a map amendment in front of us, 220820.
Okay. Good morning, members of council. Jason Morrison, Senior City Planner with Community Planning and Development. I'll be presenting the proposed rezoning at 3923 and 3929 West 38th Avenue and 3838 North Perry Street, where the request is from PUD 456 to UMS 3. The proposed rezoning is located in Council District 1, which is Amanda Sandoval's district. It's in the Berkeley neighborhood. The subject site consists of 3 parcels which contain 2 commercial structures. The proposed UMS 3 zone district, which is urban, Main Street up to 3 stories, is intended to promote safe, active, and pedestrian-scaled commercial streets through building forms that clearly define and activate the public street edge. The UMS 3 zone district applies primarily to collector and arterial streets, where building scale of 1 to 3 stories is desired. The current zoning of the subject site is PUD 456, which is a custom zone district out of the former Chapter 59 zoning code. The PUD allows for retail sales and the installation of storage, automobile accessories. Maximum building heights within the PUD are 2 stories or 25 feet. Any setbacks and allowed encroachments conform with the B1 and R2 zone district. The existing land use on the site is commercial, retail, and industrial. It's surrounded by a variety of residential zone districts and a mix of office, commercial, and industrial uses. This slide shows the existing context surrounding the subject site with the proposed rezoning on the top left. Nearby, you see examples of industrial, commercial, and residential uses. All public notice requirements have been met, and since the staff report was published, we have received 9 letters of support and 1 letter of opposition from the Berkeley Regis RNO, citing concerns about the proposed rezoning as part of the northernmost part of the property along Perry Street and potential impacts to an active irrigation ditch abutting the property. However, it's my understanding that the applicant has been in conversations with the RNO about a good neighbor agreement, which should be executed before City Council. As you know, there are 5 review criteria when analyzing the appropriateness of a request. The first criteria is consistency with adopted plans. There are 2 plans applicable to this rezoning. That's Comp Plan 2040 and Blueprint Denver. The rezoning is consistent with several strategies in Comp Plan, and they are detailed in the staff report. When looking at Blueprint Denver, the future neighborhood context is urban, and staff finds that the proposed rezoning is appropriate and consistent with the urban neighborhood context plan direction because it will promote an urban mixed-use built-to environment that will be compatible with the existing residential area and the 38th Avenue commercial corridor. Blueprint identifies the future place of the area as local corridor, which typically provides a mix of low to mid-scale multi-unit options where limited mixed use can be found along collector streets. Staff finds that the proposed rezoning to UMS3 is appropriate and consistent with the local corridor designation, as it allows for the mixed-use development of pedestrian-friendly building forms up to 3 stories that define and activate the public street edge. The subject property is located within the all other areas of the city growth area. These areas are expected to see 10% of new employment growth and 20% of new housing growth by the year 2040. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the growth strategy that is mapped in this area. Blueprint also has policy language around rezoning properties from the former Chapter 59 zoning code and out of custom zoning, such as the site plan specific condition on the subject property. Therefore, staff finds that this proposed rezoning is consistent with Blueprint Denver. Staff also finds that the requested rezoning meets the next 2 criteria. The rezoning will result in uniformity of district regulations and will further the public health, safety, and welfare, primarily through its implementation of adopted plans and through improved design standards. Additionally, the proposed zone district will help facilitate housing density near a mix of uses and transit amenities. This rezoning would bring this property from former Chapter 59 zoning into the new Denver zoning code. Such a change is listed in the zoning code as an appropriate justifying circumstance. Lastly, staff finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the zone district purpose and intent of the UMS3 zone district. And based on the review criteria, staff recommends the planning board recommend approval of the proposed rezoning. Thank you.
Are there any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, I have one question for you, Jason. Why is it that CPD puts properties that are being rezoned from old Chapter 59 on consent on planning board? I don't understand, I understand why ADUs are in consent, but I don't understand why these type of properties go on consent on the planning board agenda.
Sure, it's certainly not every property that's coming out of former Chapter 59. What we look at is we look at if the application meets all the review criteria and we don't have a lot of opposition, and it's a pretty straightforward case. That's typically, the planning board bylaws allow cases to be put on planning board. However, planning board can always pull a case off of the agenda if they would like to discuss it or if opposition does show up at the meeting. So it's not every case that is coming out of former Chapter 59, but this particular case just happened to be
So
that.
even though the RNO sent a letter of opposition, it still went on consent? I don't quite understand that because obviously there's opposition from the registered neighborhood organization. So why was it still placed on consent?
Sure, so we discussed this a little bit, and a lot of the opposition that was expressed in that opposition letter are all items that can be addressed during the site development plan process, so they're not specific to the review criteria. And so in discussing with planning board, we thought that we would keep it on the agenda, and if folks did decide to, the consent agenda, and if folks did decide to come to speak on behalf of the application, we would have pulled it and discussed it.
So you talk with planning board members or just the chair of the planning
Just
board?
the chair of planning board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Do we have a motion to move 0820? Moved by Paul Cashman, seconded by Councilman Clark. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Fran from planning. No? Okay, so next we'll move to Councilwoman Black. And welcome Councilwoman Black to the committee. No problem. Hi. So we have Councilwoman Black. She is talking about changes to the Denver City Council Rules of Procedure.
So we're having a problem, a technical difficulty bringing up the PowerPoint, but I'm Kendra Black, and I am a Denver City Council person representing Southeast Denver District 4. And I actually have two things I'm going to talk about in this one presentation. It's an ordinance change and a rules change. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I think it's here. Justin, we just needed you to walk into the room. All right, there it is. It's just being very slow.
Just showing up.
Whoops. Let's see. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So this is actually presented by me, Councilwoman Sawyer, and Councilman Flynn. So Councilwoman Sawyer's here, so she also can answer questions. Councilman Flynn is not here, but we worked on this together. So I'll just do a quick review. This is a slide that I borrow from CPD, just a reminder about Denver landmarks, just for your reference. This is just also another reminder about who can apply and how much it costs, and on average, how many we get every year. Since 2010, there have been 18 owner-opposed applications received, and only one was approved. This slide is really about why we're here. And we presented to this group, we actually presented at Budget and Policy, I think last November. And Councilwoman Sawyer and Councilman Flynn and I had been hearing from people who had concerns about owner-opposed designations. And when we presented in November, we talked about some various ideas that people had brought to us. And today, we're only talking about one of those ideas, and that was to allow owners to present at a public hearing if someone has applied to designate their property without their consent. Currently, if you are an owner and you are opposed, you only get your 3 minutes during the public hearing, and you don't get an opportunity to present. So that's really the only thing we're addressing today. So Councilwoman Sawyer, Councilman Flynn, and I worked together with our attorneys and with CPD and Historic Denver to develop these updates. So we have an ordinance that will allow applicants and owners or residents an opportunity to present at a hearing for a designation or a historic district, rather than just having their 3 minutes. Then there's a rules update that accompanies that has more details. And one of the things it would allow is in a district, people who are owners or residents of a district can give their 3 minutes to someone else to present. So if there were 10 owners who wanted a professional to present their position on their behalf, they can cede that time. And that both of these apply to people who are applicants or are in favor of it, as well as people who might not be in favor of it. So this list at the bottom shows how the presentation and hearing would work when they come to council. So CPD would do their regular presentation, and then the applicant who may be applying for as an owner-opposed designation, that applicant can present. And also owners or residents in the district could also present. And then the owner who may be opposed can also present. And the same is true if you were in a district, whether you were in favor or not in favor. So there could be three presentations before the public hearing actually starts. But if you are in favor or not in favor of it, you get the same opportunity, if that makes sense. And there's the updates. That's the update to the code. And then this is the update to the rules. And that's it. And we have, over the course of months, communicated with all council members, and everyone seemed to be okay with it. And as I said, CPD is also fine with it, as is Historic Denver. That's it.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions on this matter from our colleagues? And I see that for this, we were going to have some public comment, but I don't think anyone signed up for public comment from what I understand. President Torres, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Just curious, on slide 5, you refer to a time limit for the applicant and the owner of 3 minutes, but is it presumed to be limited to 3 minutes in the ordinance?
So when we have a public hearing, people can speak for 3 minutes. This idea is only for a historic district. And so if we were having a hearing for a historic district, we might have 50 people here to speak, and they each only get 3 minutes. But we've had feedback from people who were in a proposed district who weren't supportive of it, but they never had the opportunity to do a presentation. They were only allowed to come up and express their thoughts in 3 minutes. And so the idea behind this is that, say, if 10 of those 50 people wanted to cede their time to one person who could give a whole presentation, then they could do that. So you could have more of a professional presentation rather than just 3 minutes. And that same opportunity would be afforded to people who were in favor of it too. So they get the same opportunity. They don't have to do it, of course, but that is some feedback that we heard from people, is they didn't feel like they had that with CPD presenting, CPD is presenting for us to approve it because they're recommending approval, but other people felt like they didn't have that same opportunity. So it's just giving them that opportunity if they would like to have a PowerPoint or whatever.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sawyer?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Councilwoman Black for all of her work on this. She has done an incredible amount of work to bring us to this point. And just want to, acknowledge the problem we're trying to solve here, right? Which is just a challenge of fairness. What we keep hearing is it feels unfair to people who are owners of property that might be designated for some reason or another, whether it be a district, whether it be an owner-opposed historic designation, to really make sure that we are providing the same opportunity to both sides. Although it is, not true that CPD is presenting on behalf of the owner, as Councilwoman Black just alluded to, they are presenting with the recommendation that it be approved. And so what we kept hearing is that it feels like it. It feels like they're advocating for the party that wants it designated. So we had a lot of conversations with council members to work through what are some of the potential ways that we could address this issue. And this was the one thing that we really found was a way to truly kind of just make sure that we're leveling the playing field. And it also mirrors the way the hearings are done at the Historic Preservation Committee hearings. So, we're really just sort of like aligning those opportunities. The district designation was a little bit difficult to make sure that we found a way to do that that wasn't gonna, cost residents significant amounts of money or anything like that. But I think that this really lands on addressing the problem, which is fairness, in a way that makes sense, that is cost effective for residents, that is, aligns the hearing practices at council with the hearing practices of previous hearings, and really sort of just achieves that goal of ensuring that everyone is getting a true everyone who has property rights in the matter is getting a true and equal opportunity to speak on those, about this. So Thanks, Councilwoman Black, you did an awesome job.
Thank you for that, Councilwoman Sawyer. Up next, we have Councilwoman Sita Baca online.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. It was kind of touched on in the previous comments about aligning with Historic Preservation Commission, but I'm curious of why we would want to duplicate the processes that are already available in the Historic Preservation Commission, and also why make the changes just for historic preservation and not for, say, people who are renters in a property that is being rezoned by an owner, and the renters may not agree with the rezoning. I mean, it would seem that the level of unfairness is similar, and so I'm wondering why just historic preservation and nothing else.
Thanks for the question. The reason we're only looking at historic preservation is because that's what we set out to do. In an earlier slide, I showed that the reason we're here today is because we had gotten feedback from a lot of people involved with owner-opposed designations, or people who lived in districts that weren't supportive of them, and they asked us to address this. So that is why we are talking about historic designation. It's not that what you are identifying is a problem or isn't a problem. That's just not what we looked at. And your first question was, why would we want to be the same as the Landmark Preservation Commission? We didn't set out to do that. But that is a fact that we did make it more like that, and that does seem to work. And this just is an equitable way, and all of the stakeholders we've talked to are supportive of it.
And if I can just add to that, yeah, I think Councilwoman Sita Baca, two things. First of all, a historic designation of any kind can only be a decision that is made by council. So aligning the practices at the Historic Preservation Committee hearings with council hearings makes sense, because the final decision rests with council. So it's actually more important that that be done here than at the Historic Preservation Commission meetings, because we are the only body that has the right to actually designate something historic at the end of the day within the city and county of Denver. So so that's the hopefully expands a little bit more on question one. In terms of your second question about adding it for other, other situations, it's a great question. We were specifically addressing historic preservation here, but we did sort of talk through that a little bit in some of our conversations with Historic Denver in particular, and our attorneys. And what we really came down to is that unlike rezoning hearings, where there is an opportunity for residents to file a petition against that would require that supermajority, right, if they are not in favor of that rezoning. Historic designation hearings don't have that option. And it is, in fact, one of the options that we looked at as a possible solution to this challenge. It was not the solution that we settled on for a couple of different reasons, but that's why, right? And if, what you're really asking here is, why don't we allow renters who are registered at a property to be able to sign those petitions? The answer to that is because no one's looked into it. That's not what we're addressing here. We did look at the potential considerations when it came to having a supermajority requirement and a petition process. And at the end of the day, that's not something that is supported by council. And we don't actually think it would solve the problem based on the feedback that we heard. So that's why we've settled on this option for historic preservation hearings in particular in front of council. And so hopefully that answers your question a little bit more as well.
It does. And I appreciate the precedence it sets, because I do think that we need to explore how to give renters some level playing field when they're opposing a range of different things. And so that sounds like another problem to tackle, but I'm glad you guys have opened the door to talk about equity in that way. And so thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I just have a comment. Thank you for working on this. This is important. And I sat on a mock city council hearing with other council members last week, and I learned that Denver is the only city that doesn't allow the applicant to present in front of the final city council hearing or the commission, like if they're land use commissioners, that every other jurisdiction allows applicants to actually present their case. You have the planning department and then the applicant. And I've sat on many of these Landmark Preservation Commission hearings, and I do think it's a great idea to be able to have the applicant give color and fill in portions that not just the criteria, but why or why not. So I totally agree with this moving forward, and thank you for doing all the other exploration of the ideas you had in meeting with us. This is important work to create the type of equity that we need, and I serve on the Equity and Rezoning Task Force with Councilwoman Gilmore, and I'm going to bring forward the recommendation that we actually try to change our public hearings to allow an applicant to present at City Council as part of the, similar to what you're doing here, so that we can hear from that. Once I learned that we were the only jurisdiction, I was like, why are we doing that way? So thank you. Do we have a motion to move? Can we move both bills together? Is that okay? Do we have a motion to move Bill 0840 and 0841 to the full council? Moved by Councilman Cashman, seconded by Councilman Clark. Thank you, Councilman Black. So next up, Zach, I'll let you give us some options for Bill 220821.
Yeah, so the planner assigned to this case is actually stuck on a plane on our way back from a funeral in Chile. I will defer to council, the committee, what you want to do. You have two options. You can move it out. The staff report is included in Granicus. You can look through it, spend some time, and either move it forward with a motion, or you can defer it to another date certain, which I would suggest doing the 26th, which would be next Tuesday. But you can address any concerns. And in committee, we're just looking for completeness in the packet. Any concerns with the actual zoning should be addressed during the public hearing at council.
Do I have any concerns from my colleagues moving this forward to City Council? Councilwoman President Torres, it's in your council district, so can I, yeah.
Yeah, I'd actually like to keep it in committee, so if we can defer it to next Tuesday,
Sure.
That would be preferred, just to make sure that we have all the information there.
So the motion is to delay until next Tuesday, the 26th.
Yes.
Could we have Councilman President Torres moved it, seconded by Clark. So we will defer 0821 to next week's committee, July 26th. Is that correct, Zach?
That's right.
All right. Thank you. Seeing
Thanks.
no other action items, we have one item on consent. So if you need to pull that off, please contact me. And other than that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.